Hi there, welcome to the Krista Moore Show. This show is brought to you as a new way to learn as I interview industry experts and thought leaders on subjects that are important to your happiness, your wellness, and your business success. I don't know about you, but I'm in a time right now where some days I just feel overwhelmed or not productive, even though I seemingly have a lot of time on my hands. And I'm hearing this same thing from a lot of friends and colleagues and clients. So today's topic is really timely. I'm going to be interviewing what I would refer to as the productivity expert. And let me go ahead and introduce my guest today, Belinda Goodrich. And she is an award-winning author, speaker. She's written 8 books, and she's here to join us today. And hopefully we can learn from you today how we can rewire our brains to be more productive.
Most definitely. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I know that we met about 3 years ago. I'm not sure if you remember that. It was like at a Key 5 event. And I loved your on-stage presence. And it was interesting because you made this topic about productivity, which would seemingly be kind of boring. I mean, you kind of brought it to life. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell our kind of followership what you're all about, a little bit about your business and yourself personally. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So yes, my name is Belinda Goodrich, and my expertise actually started out to be in project management. And I was very blessed to have a fantastic career. I worked across a number of industries and really helping businesses understand how to get work done, how to get their projects done, deliver, grow, adapt to changing times. And through my career, I did that for almost 30 years. I was very focused on tools, providing the right tools for people to deliver on their projects. And I realized probably pretty quickly on that it was much more about the mindset and what's going on internally with people versus just, oh, here's some tools. And when you use these, you're going to be magically more productive. And so it was that, I guess, intrigue, I can say, of the brain and how the brain works and how motivation works in conjunction with productivity. And so I pursued my master's in industrial and organizational psychology. And I'm completely obsessed with helping people live a more fulfilling, complete life where they don't feel harried all the time and stressed and rushing around. And so that's what I focus on. I have written a number of books, and I have a publishing company. I consult with a number of different organizations, and I'm speaking, and I get to speak on productivity. So it's fun.
Yeah, and I'm curious, just a curiosity question. I mean, well, first off, let me point out that you are the only female that it holds 6 credentials in this area. Am I right in how I said that?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I hold 6 advanced credentials in project management, and yeah, I'm the only woman in the world, and I've held that title for quite a while now. Yeah. So.
And I find it fascinating that this is your niche, right? This is who you are. This is what you're giving back to the world every day in your speaking and your writing. Why productivity? Why project management? I mean, what is it about that really drives you?
Oh, what a great question. I think it really comes from how I was raised. So my parents own their own business. And I think when you grow up in a family that's a small business family, it's 24/7. You're always working that business. And so it didn't seem like a chore or a bad thing to always be working. It just seemed like that's what you did. And when I moved into corporate environments, I found that people weren't quite as emotionally engaged in it because they didn't have as much skin in the game. So I think when I went into the corporate world, I came in with the small business mindset of the, owner mindset. And so I approached all my projects like it was my own money, it was my own contribution.
I'm glad that I asked that question because there are so many small business owners and entrepreneurs on the line that certainly can relate to that. And I like what you said about skin in the game. It's like that personal accountability to getting it done. And the reason that I find it so timely is we have a lot of folks that are concerned that their employees aren't being productive. You know, they might be the business owner and their employees are now working from home and they worry about productivity levels. What do you kind of have to say about that?
Yeah, you know, and there's so much because again, when we think, especially right now, psychologically, there's so much going on with our employees, right? So it's not the day-to-day going into work, which already you can face some issues with that. But now you're layering on all the emotional uncertainty, splitting their time even more now, potentially having children at home that they're trying to homeschool or worrying about, you know, elderly parents. And there's just so much more emotionally to it right now that's going on. And I kind of look at it two ways. Number one is I always say, you know, let's give a little bit of grace right now, even to people who are very high performers. Don't beat yourself up if you're not performing at that level you normally would. These are different times. And so I think first and foremost, give yourself some grace and give your employees some grace. Secondly is just really understanding small incremental goals right now is going to be key. Like, what am I working on this week? What am I going to work on today? And I think if your employees can just focus on that versus bigger pieces, bigger projects, longer term, that's going to help them. They're going to get that feeling of satisfaction when they do accomplish the day-to-day stuff of like, today, this is just the one thing I'm going to work on today. And I think that definitely can help, but it is interesting times.
Well, and I think of the word overwhelm. You know, it's kind of like where we have just all these different messages coming at us as you were describing. Maybe you have your homeschooling kids and you're working at home and you know, you have to be accountable to your job, but also to some other things that are going on. And then you have the overwhelm of noise and news. And that kind of has got to do something that almost stops us in our tracks. And I think that's where your studying of neuro-linguistic, whatever the
Yeah.
terminology is that you're a specialist in, and the brain, right? So tell us, maybe in layman terms, how the brain can be rewired to be more productive.
Certainly. So, you know, when we look at how our brain is and how our brain functions, it's actually very, very simplistic. Our brain actually hasn't changed, even though our environment and our world has changed rapidly, right? Our brain is still kind of the caveman brain where the focus is homeostasis, meaning things the same, and survival. So if you as a being are surviving, in a certain state, in a certain environment, then the brain wants to keep you there, right? And so think about how that now impacts our world where we're constantly being bombarded with information from so many sources. And our brain's like, no, 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 I just like homeostasis. I just don't want things to change. And so what we have to actually do is understand what's going on really deep inside our brain, like literally to our limbic system, to then say, okay, I can do these little modifications, these little tweaks, and it's going to allow me to get, I call them wins in our column. That's going to make me feel better. It's going to make me feel more confident and then allow me to take on a little bit more, take on a little bit more. But when we're just surveying a massive landscape, again, think if we're kind of caveman and we're looking out over the hills and there's beasts everywhere, there's threats everywhere, there's enemies everywhere. That's basically what our brain is perceiving from our always on world right now. These are all coming at us as threats. And so our brain's trying to figure out, well, what do I deal with first? What's the most critical thing? And that's where people get that overwhelm, that paralyzed feeling. And you said it stopped in our tracks, right? We go, oh, I don't even know what to do yet. And that's actually our body's reaction to all of the stimuli.
Well, and that paralyzed feeling, I think what happens mentally is we try and get out of it. But we also are kind of self-talking and saying, it's okay to just hang out for a little bit because it's safe here, right?
Yeah, definitely. Our self-talk has such an impact on how we behave and the messages, and we don't realize that every little thought we have, our brain is going to align around that. So if we're saying to ourselves, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I can't seem to get anything done," our brain's going, "Oh, okay, we're overwhelmed, we're stressed, we can't get anything done." And it's actually kind of this negative feedback cycle that's happening that we're talking ourselves into that place.
I want to ask a question around this. I don't even know if this is appropriate or if you even have an answer on this, but I'm curious. I think that forget that COVID-19 is going on and the pandemic and all of these world things, that are beyond our control that can impact our productivity. But just in a day-to-day world, in a normal culture, normal situation, I think that there are certain people that aren't as productive as others. And whether I might say, well, they're a little too ADD, they're squirrely, they go from here to here and they really pushing papers around, but not being productive. What do you have to kind of say about that? Or what are your thoughts around what I had just said?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think I mean, we have research out that says, within the next 15 years, at least 30% of our workforce is going to be what we call neuroatypical. And when we say neuroatypical, that's folks that have ADD, ADHD, and stuff like that. And, I'm not going to debate causes or why that is, but certainly when we look at our environment and how much stimuli we have 24/7, it is a huge contributor to that. And if you don't know how to maturely manage that, that's where you have that increase in that attention deficit, that squirrel syndrome, or, oh, I got to switch. And there's actually a chemical process that's going on in our brain that's actually impacting that. We actually get a dopamine hit every time we switch focus. Because again, our brain is looking for threats. When we switch focus to something, our brain actually releases dopamine and we get this little microburst of a very addictive chemical. It's the same chemical that, junkies would get addicted to drugs and stuff like that. It's the exact same chemical. And so you obviously want more of what feels good. So in this bizarre twist, as much as we don't want to be distracted, we're getting an actual dopamine hit every time we're distracted. And so then our body goes, oh, I should look at another window, or I should open another email, or, and it's that constant on is actually feeding our brain dopamine.
So when you describe something as that physical addiction to distraction, I've heard you say that. Is this what you're referring to? It's actually what it is. It's a physical addiction.
It is literally a physical addiction. And this is how, it's the one thing I always tell people when I'm working with companies, small business owners, individuals, is keep a log for a day of, how quickly, like most of us have next to us, right? Our phone. How long can you actually focus on one thing before you're tempted to look at your phone, look at an email, look at another window on your computer? And now it's even worse because now we have the watches that tell us when a message comes through. So that sensory overload, right? And so what happens, and people will experience this all the time, is it'll be a little while and they won't have received a message or an email, and all of a sudden they'll think, oh, my phone must not be working. That's how addicted we are.
Yeah.
And it's a chemical drive within our brain going, hey, I need another fix. I need some more dopamine. So to be able to get away from that addiction is learning to shut things off. And it's so hard for people. And we come up with great excuses, just like any addict does. Oh, no, I got to keep my phone on because I have kids, or,
I'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper so that our audience can be thinking about going forward when that happens to them, and what can they change or do differently to kind of get out of that cycle. One thing that came to mind as you were describing this physical addiction to distractions and like the science and the brain and chemical aspects of it, I think that there are a lot of people that will leave work or be done with the day and feel like they were really busy, but not really getting anything done. But it was that feeling of, oh, I did this and I did this, and I was busy, but it wasn't productive. And what would you say to those that kind of use that almost as an excuse. I like the idea of the kind of keeping track of the calendar. Is there any other advice that you might give them?
Sure. Yeah. There's actually there's a few things, and I always say there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. And I was a big one with this. I mean, I run a couple of different businesses. I'm on the road a lot. I'm like, oh, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. What am I filling my time doing? And is it the right things? And is it the important stuff? Because being busy just means you're wasting time. You're putting time towards something. Being productive means that you're actually working on the right things. And, so first and foremost is know what you want, know where you're going. And then with every action you take during the day, consider, does this lend to where I'm going, or is it actually an obstacle? Is it preventing me from getting where I want to be? And I'll give you an example if that's okay, because I just think this is
Be great, because I think that if we can maybe talk about the three things that you
yeah.
would recommend, first being that kind of clarity of vision, right? Is that what you're referring to?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is where it really for me went like the big aha moment, right? I was watching a dear friend of mine speak. He was giving a presentation and it was part of National Speakers Association meeting. And he said that he was challenged early on in his career by his mentor. And he said, here's what you need to think each and every day is what you're doing right now making you the person you want to be? Would the person you want to be in the future be doing what you're doing right now? And it was so convicting. And I thought, for me, one of my passions is writing. I love books, and I wanted to write more. And I had to ask myself that tough question. So would a best-selling novelist be playing on Facebook right now? Would they be doing this or doing that? No, they wouldn't. They would actually be studying their craft, and they would be devoting time to writing. So that's the question. Would the person you want to be doing what you're doing right now? And I still continue to ask myself that all through the day. And it's my true north. It's my conviction point.
I really like that. That's great advice. Something that I learned early on, when I was dealing with being more productive, we all kind of go through different changes in our career or our life where we realize that we have a lot on our plate. And in order to get things done, I've got to be more organized and more productive. Was appreciating and realizing the value of time and not wasting time and what a precious resource time is. And that was a really rude awakening for me. So an outcome of that is I made sure that I scheduled my time out to the T. Like if you looked at my calendar online or in Outlook, you would see almost every hour in the day scheduled, not just client appointments, but things that I'm going to do in that time.
Right.
And they're color coded. So because I want to make sure that I have enough personal time, and I mean, exercise is in purple and the new business growth is in yellow. And that just works for me because I'm a visual. But what I did is I took that I guess it's just a resource and it's so valuable, and that's time because it could be wasted and might be over tomorrow. And I just think that helped me, feel like I was getting more done and focusing on the clarity around what was important.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and that the color thing too is so visual. And I mean, we are, like I say, we are not much beyond, I always like to use Pavlov's dogs when it comes to like habit setting. It gets to the point that I like to run. That's my personal time. Like you, I have it on my calendar. I schedule it. I know I'm out for my run. I have a playlist I only listen to when I run. As soon as one of those songs happens to come on somewhere else that I might, accidentally hear it, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to run. And it's because my brain has gotten so programmed to that. And so any type of sensory output, and it could be just something, a color. Oh, I see something in purple on my calendar is about to happen. And that's my meditation time. And it helps you get into that zone. So that's awesome. Having that color code is fantastic.
And that works for me. The clear vision that you speak about as a tip, really defining what the day goals are or the objectives. That's what I'm thinking you're referring to. Do you want to kind of expand on clarity of vision or having a clear vision that it's going to help you with your productivity?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what happens a lot of times is we get very externally focused, right, on everybody else in our lives that need us, what society thinks we should do or should not do. And we really have to tap into what is right for us. And I say, we're all born with this beautiful internal navigation, this beautiful GPS system. And and you'll know what I'm talking about. Like if you've done something that you can just tell doesn't feel quite right, there's you're not sure why, but there's this little nagging inside. Well, that's telling you it's not aligning with your true north, where you should be heading and what you should be doing. And I think it takes time to develop that, to really say, okay, this is how I define my life. I always tell people, this is kind of a morbid exercise, but I tell people to picture their funeral. What do you want people saying about you at your funeral? And then now how does that relate with what you wanted out of your life? And I know, like I say, I had to have a couple points in my life where I said, oh, they're going to say I just worked all the time and I was stressed out. And it's like, okay, that's not what I want my life legacy to be. So you have to know what it is. I think having something visual like a vision board, if you have this goal, like I wanted to be an author, I want to have a ranch with horses. I have that very prominently displayed because it keeps me grounded in that. It always keeps me centered. And like I say, then you can always do the check and balance of it is what I'm doing right now lending towards that.
Yeah. And you mentioned the vision board, and we do a vision board exercise with some of our programs, but I have this vision board right beside my desk, and you can't miss it when you walk into the office. And I have not used it to stay on task as much as maybe I should, but I'm going to after we're done with today's call. I think if I just get into the habit of looking at it every morning, because I mean, I'm a true believer in the whole manifestation stuff and
Exactly.
staying
Yeah, and
focused.
if the brain sees it, the brain believes it, right? And so then it starts to put your energy around making that happen. And I mean, we can talk law of attraction for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I 100% believe in manifestation and law of attraction. It's what we put out there is what we're going to get back. And so when I see that, and that's what I'm working towards, and I can feel it with every part of me that this is what my life is going to be, it happens.
As you say that, I'm thinking productivity is energy.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. And you can either, like I say, go against that core, or you can go towards it. And listen to that intuition, that gut feel. I've never had it do me wrong. And I've learned as I've aged and matured to listen to it more and more.
One of the other tips that you spoke about a little bit earlier, but I wanted to dive a little more deeply, is to just don't be so hard on yourself and your employees. Give them some grace, especially at this time. And focusing on one or two things instead of feeling that overwhelm, let's get that down to one or two items that you want to accomplish or that you want to focus on within a certain time frame.
Yeah, this is great. I'm glad you asked about that. So one thing for me, and maybe your listeners will resonate, this will resonate. Like I was a big to-do list person. I loved to-do lists, and I would have to-do lists of my to-do list. And if I did something that wasn't on my to-do list, I would go ahead and add it on there so I could cross it out. And as part of my neuropsychology studies, I actually learned how damaging those to-do lists are to us. And so track with me here on this. When we go into our office, say on a Monday, we make our to-do list for the week, or maybe you have it in your home office or whatever. And, when I talk to business owners, they will say usually at the start of the week, they have between 20 and 30 items on their to-do list. Okay, at the end of each day, they may cross out 3 or 4, and they might have added a couple. Okay, so at first you get a little bit of a good endorphin thing there, like, oh, I crossed some things off. But the problem is again, go back to the core of how our brain behaves. Our brain works on comparisons. Okay, that's how it, again, that back to that homeostasis. So when it looks at a to-do list where there's only a little bit of things that have been crossed off, but a whole lot of things that haven't been, the brain panics. Okay, it starts to go into, basically an amygdala hijack. It starts to get stress hormones going because it's like, oh, I didn't get enough. And that's very hardwired into us. This is not an emotional thing. This is actually a physical thing that's happened. So what I say is it's okay to have a to-do list, but what you need to do with it is pull over your top priority. I like to write them. I always have sticky notes next to me. I like to write my priority on a sticky note. I put it on my computer monitor. I focus only on that, and then I go back to the to-do list and pull the next one. So I call it the vault strategy, because I say lock your to-do list in a vault, and the only way you get to open that up is if you've done your sticky note. And there's nothing better than taking the sticky note and being like, yep, that one's done. It's great.
That also lends itself nicely to those of us, which is the majority of us, will do the things that we enjoy doing, not the items that maybe are going to task us a little bit more, or that we really don't like but we have to do. So naturally that to-do list is going to sit there with all the stuff that we really have been procrastinating on or not thrilled about doing.
Exactly.
So that I could see how that could cause that psychological and physical response, because that's why you're feeling the way that you are.
Got it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3. Like, is it one thing to focus on for the day? 3 goals? I mean, is there a magic number here?
The fewer the better. I would rather you do one small goal at a time and get 4 of them done during the day, but not pull all 4 over. One thing at a time. One thing, small blocks at a time, get it done. Again, you're giving yourself a nice chemical boost the right way by accomplishing things. So breaking your work down into smaller pieces and then celebrating each piece as you get it done.
That sounds great. So I'm going to offer some advice then to a lot of the business owners that had that question, that are worried about not only themselves being productive, but their employees, because they're out of sight, out of mind, trusting that they are actually doing their job and being as productive as they are getting paid to be. I'm hearing this, right? So I'm thinking that just the first 2 things that you mentioned, clarity of objectives and clearly defining what the goals are for the day. How wonderful if you could have a coaching conversation with that employee at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of the day, and get them more clear on what their objectives are for the day, and really getting that to-do list down to an understanding of what's really important. And then again, celebrating those successes. So we could carry these techniques over to our employees as well. That's what I took from that. Yeah. What would be the third thing if you were to leave today with some advice?
I think the third thing would be our internal self-talk. Start paying attention to what you're saying to yourself. Start really listening to your words that you're thinking, and how you're addressing it. It could be how you walk by a mirror and what you assess your body at. It could be how you feel your hair is looking today. It could be, again, are you making the negative statements of, I'm not productive. I'm never going to get through this. I'm so frustrated. Again, our brain's going to polarize to that. So really watch that self-talk. And I think you'll be very, very surprised what you find yourself saying to you. And like I say, you'll start to, that's what will happen. So change that talk and make it positive. And it might be it takes practice sometimes. Like, okay, I'm productive today. I feel great today. I'm getting stuff done. Say those messages, and it's amazing the impact they'll have.
Wow, that's great advice. And sometimes we just kind of forget that. And it's not just maybe what we're saying to ourselves, but what we're hearing from others. If we're in a small, tight quarters, and maybe our spouse or significant other or our kids have this negative self-talk, that stuff can really kind of be weight on your shoulders, and you can be in that kind of environment that is causing more and more of that. And that, I think, understanding if that's happening in your world and addressing that would be very important, I think.
Excellent. Yeah.
To a lot of professionals, entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, they're starting to realize the impact of that negative self-talk on productivity, and they're starting to implement things like yoga, or like a morning prime of gratitude, or meditation. Do you have any general thoughts on maybe some habits that we could get into that can kind of prime our day?
Yeah, I definitely in my book I talk a lot about that meditation is huge, giving yourself that quiet time to really get introspective. The other thing to me that is life-changing is journaling and actual pen to paper, because when we put pen to paper, not type, but pen to paper, we actually create new neural pathways in our brain. So we become much more receptive, we become much more engaged in our world. And so when you write out what you're grateful for, what you accomplished that day, the blessings in your life, it does completely change. It starts to rewire us more to the positive. And so gratitude journaling in general, doing your meditation time. And meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged in a quiet room. I meditate when I run. So it's
Mhm.
whatever gets you into that space, because I turn off all distractions when I run. I don't have my phone's not beeping at me. I'm in my space with my music, and that's my time to really think. And that's my most productive time of the day is during my run.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I appreciate
Of
that.
course.
Couple of just final questions before we go, and I always like to ask this of my guests, but what were you doing when you were 10 years old? I'm curious who you are at your core before social pressure and influence, like fourth, fifth grade.
Oh my goodness. I was a child of the woods. I grew up in Maine, in a small town in Maine, and out in the country, and I love being outside in the woods, in nature, around animals and water, and just exploring. And that was my thing. It was being outside or reading books, or preferably both at the same time. Reading books outside would be perfect.
There you go. So when's the last time you read a book outside?
Not too long ago, actually. I try to do it sit out on my patio now. I did a beautiful hike to Havasupai Falls last September and just shut off from the world and was in this amazing water. And so I learned that I needed to get back to that. That's where I am at my core, like you say. That's such a beautiful point to make. And that's where I am the happiest, is when I am outside and, like I say, around animals and around water, and happy place.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share a slide where others can reach out to you for additional information, or where they can hear more on your topics, and also where they can get your latest book, because I think that we all could benefit from it at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and share that. And let me just see right here. Yeah. Um, Best way to get a hold of you?
Yep, there's my website, belindagoodrich.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as the B Goodrich. And my book is Get It Done. It is on Amazon, and we'll actually be doing a virtual book signing later today. So the SH is silent, so it is actually Get It Done.
I think a lot of people like the not silent, so it's like whatever you choose, right?
Right, exactly.
And then this is your YouTube, I believe, your
Yes.
YouTube channel.
Yep, I have a YouTube channel out there, and again, it's the B Goodrich, and I put productivity hacks out there, and other things that you can do to win in your life.
That sounds great. Well, Belinda, I want to thank you for joining us today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that our audience did too. And I'm curious if you can just maybe tell us about this virtual book signing. How does that work? And if somebody's interested, how do they learn about that?
Sure. One of my dreams as a little girl, kind of resonating with who I want to be, was an author, and I always dreamed of having a book signing at Barnes and Noble. And I had it finally scheduled, and with COVID-19, unfortunately, they had to cancel it. And so I have a great big stack of books I was going to bring to Barnes and Noble to sign, and I can't do that. So it's a Zoom link that's set up. You can find more information on my Facebook page at The B Goodrich, or under Goodrich Publishing. And basically people can jump on, they can get the book for a reduced price, and I will autograph it for them and mail it out.
That sounds great. Well, I'm glad your
Yes.
dream's coming true of
Thank you.
having your book signing at Barnes and Noble, kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
In today's world, I'll take it.
We had a couple of questions, so let me just see if I can see this. Really just people responding that they thought this was a great show and that they learned a lot today. So I really appreciate that, because that's what we try and deliver for our guests. But thank you for joining us, and take care of yourself, and I'll talk with you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say to everyone that the Krista Moore Show, it will continue to be live on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. but I am going to be moving to a different platform. I'm going to ease into it. I think it's July 1st is the kickoff, and it's going to be live streamed to multiple channels. So you won't need to pre-register and attend it in the GoToWebinar platform. That way I can just get a broader reach. And but the trick here is you need to follow me on LinkedIn, my YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you can find me socially. Start following, and then you'll get a notice when I go live. I want to continue to bring you great guests like I had today with Belinda Goodrich, those that can help us be the best that we can be and really look at ourselves as a whole person and be focused not just on our business success, but our health and our wellness as well. Until next week, take care of yourself, and I'll see you then. Thank you.